You'll never amount to anything. My father didn't raise his voice when he said it. He didn't look angry. He simply continued cutting his food, as if the sentence had slipped out by accident, as ordinary as asking someone to pass the salt. That calmness made it worse. It told me he believed it. The words settled heavily in my chest, familiar and sharp at the same time. I had heard versions of them my whole life, phrases shaped differently, softened sometimes, but always carrying the same meaning. You are not enough. You never will be. I was sitting in the same chair I'd sat in since childhood, slightly unbalanced, one leg shorter than the others. I'd learned to adjust my posture around it, just as I'd learned to adjust myself around my family, smile gently. Don't interrupt. Don't make things uncomfortable. Across from me, my brother laughed lightly and continued talking about his plans. My mother nodded, proud, attentive. The room carried the quiet rhythm of a family dinner, forks against plates, glasses resting near fingertips, the faint hum of the ceiling fan. No one reacted to what my father had said. That silence hurt more than the words themselves. I lowered my eyes to my plate and forced myself to breathe slowly. I had trained myself to do that over the years, to swallow reactions before they showed. I told myself that speaking up would only make things awkward, that peace mattered more than being right. I had always believed love meant endurance. Growing up, I was the easy one, the child who didn't ask for much, the one who understood when money was tight, who didn't complain when attention went elsewhere. I thought being low maintenance made me lovable. I thought if I stayed gentle enough, patient enough, my place in the family would eventually feel secure. But my place had always been conditional. When the bills started stacking up years ago, I noticed before anyone said anything. I noticed the way my mother's voice tightened on phone calls, the way my father stayed up later at night, staring at paperwork spread across the kitchen table. I didn't wait to be asked. I helped quietly. The first payment felt temporary. The second felt responsible. After a while, it became routine. Every month, I sent the money. Every month, I told myself this was what families did. I never mentioned it. I never wanted it to be a transaction. I wanted it to be care. But care, I learned, can disappear when it's invisible. That night at dinner, my father went on speaking about discipline, about success, about how the world rewards strength and ambition. I listened politely, nodding at the right moments. Inside, something small and tired began to loosen. I realized that no matter how much I gave, I would always be the daughter who hadn't proven herself. The one whose value was questioned out loud, in front of everyone, without consequence, and still I didn't speak. Not yet, because silence, I was learning, wasn't always weakness. Sometimes it was preparation. Sometimes it was the space you needed to finally see the truth clearly. As the plates were cleared and the conversation drifted on, I felt a quiet shift inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't plotting. I was simply awake. And once you wake up, you can never fully sit the same way at the table again. Pain doesn't announce itself all at once. It moves in slowly, carefully, until one day you realize it has been living with you for years. After that dinner, I began noticing things I had trained myself not to see, small moments, quiet patterns. The way my father spoke about sacrifice as if it were something other people owed him. The way my mother assumed help would always appear, as long as she didn't ask too many questions. The way my brother accepted praise easily, never wondering who made the comfort around him possible. No one asked how I was managing. When conversations turned to money, I stayed quiet. When my mother sighed about expenses, I listened. I learned the difference between being trusted and being relied upon. Trust involves respect. Reliance often doesn't. I had once believed that love was proven through endurance, that if I stayed long enough, gave enough, absorbed enough, I would be rewarded with understanding. But endurance without acknowledgement slowly turns into erasure. I continued paying the mortgage month after month. I watched the confirmation emails arrive in my inbox, each one a quiet record of my presence in their lives. I archived them carefully, not because I planned to use them, but because something inside me knew that silence leaves no trace unless you keep one. I didn't feel proud when I sent the money. I felt calm, and sometimes, if I'm honest, I felt lonely. At work, people saw me differently. They listened when I spoke. They trusted me with responsibility. I realized how strange it was to feel more visible among strangers than among the people who raised me. That realization hurt more than any insult ever had. At home, nothing changed. My father still spoke as if I were drifting, unproven, uncertain. My mother still offered advice I didn't ask for, rooted in assumptions that were no longer true. And my brother, he never once wondered aloud how things were being handled so smoothly. I started to understand that secrecy isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's simply convenient. One evening, as I sat alone reviewing my finances, I noticed how carefully I had planned my life around everyone else's stability. Dreams postponed, risks avoided. A quiet voice inside me asked a question I had never allowed before. What about you? That question didn't demand answers, it just waited. I began to set small boundaries. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped filling every silence. When my father dismissed my opinions, I didn't rush to correct him. When my mother assumed I needed guidance, I listened politely and changed the subject. Distance can be gentle. It doesn't have to be dramatic. The more I observed, the clearer everything became. I wasn't unappreciated because I lacked value. I was unappreciated because my value made their comfort possible without challenge. Understanding that didn't make me bitter. It made me steady. I realized that love without honesty isn't protection. It's control, even if no one intends it that way. And I realized that staying quiet forever would eventually cost me something I couldn't replace. Self-respect doesn't arrive loudly. It grows in the pauses between words, in the decision not to shrink anymore. By the time my father invited us all to dinner again, something inside me had shifted completely. I wasn't preparing to confront anyone. I wasn't angry. I was prepared to be truthful, and truth, when spoken calmly, doesn't need permission. The second dinner felt different the moment I walked in. Nothing had changed: the same table, the same dishes, the same carefully arranged chairs. But I had. I could feel it in the way my feet touched the floor, in the steady rhythm of my breathing. I wasn't bracing myself this time. I carried a slim folder in my bag. It wasn't heavy, but I could feel its weight, not in my hands, but in my chest. Proof doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to exist. Everyone was already seated when I arrived. My father nodded at me without looking up. My mother smiled briefly. My brother was mid-story, confident and animated. I took my place quietly, the familiar chair unsteady beneath me, and folded my napkin on my lap. As the conversation flowed, I listened more than I spoke. I noticed the ease with which assumptions were made, the comfort built on years of not questioning where stability came from. My father talked about responsibility, about how some people succeed and others simply don't push hard enough. Then he looked directly at me. "You need to figure out your direction," he said calmly. "You can't rely on others forever." Something in me softened instead of breaking. I waited until the pause came naturally, until the plates were halfway empty and the room settled into that quiet space where words linger. Then I reached into my bag. The sound of the folder touching the table was small, but it cut through the room. I opened it slowly, carefully, and slid the document toward the center. "Then who," I asked gently, "has been paying your mortgage for the last 4 years?" No one moved. The ceiling fan hummed above us. A car passed outside. Inside, the air felt frozen, as if the room itself needed time to understand what had just been said. My father stared at the paper, confused at first, then still. My mother leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. My brother laughed once, uncertain, then his glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. No one rushed to clean it. I didn't explain. I didn't point. The dates spoke for themselves. The amounts were clear. Month after month, year after year, I felt no triumph, no relief, only a quiet sadness for the years it had taken to be believed without words. My father's face changed slowly, as if a door he'd never noticed had opened in his mind. My mother's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Silence filled the space where assumptions had lived comfortably for so long. I never wanted recognition. I said softly, "I just wanted honesty. That was all." I stood up calmly, smoothing my chair back into place. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. I wasn't there to win anything. "I think that's enough for tonight," I added gently. As I walked toward the door, no one stopped me, no one argued. The truth had already done what it needed to do. Outside, the night air felt cool and clean. I took a deep breath, realizing something important as the door closed behind me. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply taken myself back. I didn't expect peace to arrive so quietly. In the days after that dinner, nothing dramatic happened. There were no sudden apologies, no tearful confessions, no family meetings where everything was finally said out loud. Life continued the way it often does, slowly, cautiously, as if everyone was waiting for someone else to move first. I let the silence exist. My phone lit up with messages I didn't answer right away. Some were brief. "Can we talk?" Others were longer, filled with confusion, defensiveness, and carefully chosen words that circled responsibility without ever fully touching it. I read them without anger. Understanding doesn't always come with acceptance, and I had learned not to chase either. The following month, I didn't make the payment. It wasn't a punishment, it was a boundary. I felt a strange mixture of guilt and relief as the date passed. For years, my sense of worth had been tied to being useful, to fixing things quietly so no one had to feel uncomfortable. Letting go of that role felt like stepping into unfamiliar ground. But the ground held me. My mother called one evening. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know," she said. "I know." I replied. That was enough. Truth doesn't always need to be explained again once it's been seen. My father didn't call right away. When he finally did, his words were careful, measured. He spoke about pride, about expectations, about how he thought he was teaching strength. I listened calmly, not to agree, but to understand where the distance had come from. "I've built my own life." I said gently, "I don't need to prove it anymore." There was a long pause on the line. For the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. Over time, the family dynamic shifted, not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. They became more careful with their words, less certain in their assumptions. Respect, I learned, grows not from confrontation, but from consistency. As for me, I began to feel lighter. I redirected the money I once sent away into things I had postponed, classes I wanted to take, trips I had delayed, quiet evenings where I wasn't calculating someone else's needs before my own. I learned how to sit with myself without guilt. I didn't walk away from my family. I walked away from the version of myself that believed love required self-erasure. Sometimes I still think about that chair at the dinner table, the one that never quite stood steady. I understand now that it wasn't broken. It was simply never meant to carry all that weight alone. The lesson came gently, but it stayed. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors that open inward toward dignity. Respect begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. And strength doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just stands calmly and chooses differently. I didn't win anything that night. I gained something better. I left with my name intact, and my peace finally my own.